All right, thanks, William. Hey, everyone. Hello and welcome to our second VEBA Community Call. Today is November 30th, and we got a couple of agenda items and also people on the chat. So before we go through the agenda, any topics that you also want to discuss, and I'll put it on the agenda, just open the mic or put it in chat. Okay, looks like we are good. Otherwise, just drop them in as we go. So as part of this meeting, we wanted to cover the next releases. There's well, it's a batch release coming, the 0.7.1, and then we're preparing for the next bigger release. I'm not going to say major because technically it's not a major from a SAMVer perspective, but we're also going to talk about 0.8. And then Robert has prepared a demo of his VROPS dashboard that he built for VEBA, and we're happy to have him to present. So let's go with the milestones. So on the VEBA repository, what we usually do is we use the issues to track topics, well, bugs, features, whatever, and then we group them per milestone. And the upcoming one, the 0.7.1 release, which is due by December 16th, that's the date when we are planning to cut the release, meaning you will get a fresh new OVA deployment. There's currently 3 issues open that are mostly functions that we want to add. And overall, the 0.7 release, and this is currently in here under the projects tab, where we group the release by quarterly releases. The 0.7 has a couple of features that we added. We got a new function in, which is the VRNI databus webhook example. So it uses the webhook feature that we introduced with 0.7 in VEBA, and basically configures VRNI to send events into VEBA. And this is a custom function, and it has a little bit of logic of transforming the events because VRNI does not send cloud events. So this is a custom function which takes the VRNI events and creates cloud events out of this, so that you can then later use Slack or whatever to process them as you do with other functions that we have. There's been a couple of changes to the VEBA logo in order to follow VMware brands and stuff like that. So that is this. We got the VM preemption example in. I did a demo in the first VEBA community call around that, which adds or shows how to build something like spot instances or preemptible virtual machine instances on top of vSphere, because as of today, this is not part of the hypervisor. And so it uses VEBA and vSphere alerts to implement such a functionality as a prototype. And we would love to get feedback from the users and community, and basically hoping that eventually this will become part of the product. We did a huge update on the documentations, mainly targeting the end users for writing functions. So there's been new sections, larger sections on how a function is configured and the different pieces that make up a function and best practices for writing these functions. This is in the documentation. And yeah, this one is also nice. If you don't have a vCenter around or you don't want to do quick prototyping, you can use the Vcenter Simulator, and you could do that already, but Harish contributed this as part of a documentation that it is described on the VEBA web page for how to deploy the simulator for use with the function. Yeah, and then we started porting some of the OpenFaaS processor related functions towards Knative. And there's been a lot of functions that we had initially with VEBA for OpenFaaS. And so we are trying to reach parity for those functions to also be available for the default Knative event processor. So this is it for 0.7.1. It's a small release, mostly cosmetic fixes and functions and documentation updates.
Did you did you cover the air gap issue?
Oh yeah, so that is a bug. Good point. So that is a bug. It's not listed here.
Yeah, it's probably one of the closed items because I think that was probably one of the earliest ones. I think probably.
Yeah, we can actually. Yeah. So we had a couple of also bugs, not necessarily in VEBA, but also related to VC or other upstream services that we were depending on. One was, because I'm just seeing this here in order, one was that the Vcenter plugin reported for 703 a no healthy upstream, and the fix is coming for VC, as I was told. So that's something that basically will get in as soon as VC is patched. And then, as William said, we had issues deploying the appliance 070 in air-gapped environments, and a customer reported that. And so I think, William, it was you fixed that.
Yep, yeah, it was just one container image that got missed for the image pool thing. So
yeah, this one, yeah,
primary, that was kind of the primary one.
Yeah, we actually had 2 users hitting that, and then there's this one where, again, we had issues with special characters in the JSON escaping, which also caused a bug. So those were the bugs that we fixed. You're right. I was just focusing on features here in the roadmap, but there's also been a couple of bug fixes that went into.
Yeah. So mainly anybody that needs to deploy VEBA in an air-gapped environment, the 07.1 release, that's fully resolved, so no need to do the workaround. And then for the character escaping, again, that may prevent some customers from deploying just for more complex passwords. That's been handled. And then thirdly, back on the vSphere UI bug, even for 071, there is a workaround that needs to be applied. I think we've documented that already, and I also post on that. And so until vSphere gets that fixed, implemented for the vSphere UI plugin, you will continue to have to apply that workaround. And then something to be aware of, if in case anybody's running the latest version of 7.x, is that if you do an update to that patch, it will actually revert that change, because we're basically changing the reverse proxy and adding a parameter there. And so if you apply another, if it's not the final fix, and let's say you're using 702 A or B and you update to C, you'll have to reapply that fix as well. It will get reverted, based on the default settings that we expect.
Thanks, William. Any questions on 071 before we move to the next release?
And I see we have another folk that just joined. Gabriel, welcome.
Yeah, Gabriel, hi.
Yeah, hi. Super interested in the VEBA AMA.
Yeah, and good timing, Gabriel, as we will cover some 08 topics that you are working on.
Nice.
Yeah. If there's anything that you want to add or things that you want to discuss, feel free to shout it out or add it in chat, and then we can just add that to the agenda as we cover. And we're just going over the roadmap and kind of plan releases that we have.
Sure, we'll do.
Good. Okay, so for 08, it started out as not so much of a feature release, but more internal refactoring release, driven by 2 major streams. One is obviously getting updated bits of the backend components like Kubernetes and Knative into VEBA. So William's working on that and tracking that work. And the other stream is the deprecation of the AWS event processor and the OpenFaaS event processor in the appliance deployment, not in the router, meaning not in the internal Kubernetes deployment that we're using for the whole event processing right now. So this is merely affecting the appliance deployment, and this was announced already in the last call, and we're working on this. So that means if you're still relying on OpenFaaS event bridge processor or OpenFaaS, you can still deploy the router, which will at least for some time continue to support these processors, but the appliance itself will default to Knative for different reasons that we already shared last time. And so that I don't want to cover the Kubernetes version upgrades, but there's one topic that is associated with that, which is we are also changing from the Docker shim that we are using to CRI as the runtime and containerd. And what it means is we currently have a bug with logging, with the fluent bit logging, that we only get partial logs from VEBA into an external logging system if you're using that feature as part of VEBA, and that is caused by the old Docker shim basically that we're using. And since we are bumping versions in 08 for Kubernetes, that's also a change that's going to come in there. So that's also going to fix that logging issue. So you get all the full logs, including whatever your functions output on their log output that will be processed now correctly with 08. And then there's been a lot of work in the background on the messaging system that we use and that also other Knative projects and products use, which is RabbitMQ. So far, and a user already had reported that, we are doing like a first in, first out sequential processing of events inside the message broker. And that means that if you have a high ingestion rate or volume of events that you're sending into VEBA or like the underlying broker, and you have a trigger configured for that, like a function, there's currently no parallelism. Like it's not going to spin up multiple containers or pods for that function that you have configured. And there's one fix that went into some of the recent releases for the Rabbit broker, which allows for parallelization of these messages. So there's still going to be just one function processing the events from the queue, but there will be some concurrency setting that you can define, which currently we are still deciding whether the default will be 1 to preserve the current behavior, and users can change this up to a higher number, and then you can get higher throughput of message processing. And Gabriel and the team, they've been working on this feature. Plus, we are also working on a couple of resiliency improvements and stability work and documentation, because messaging in distributed systems is hard. And so the feedback from the VEBA community was also very helpful for the Knative and the Rabbit team to prioritize certain work, or at least also document some of the behavior of the overall system. What else do we have? Yeah, we're gonna work towards aligning the VEBA cloud events model, or the way the cloud events look in VEBA, towards the way it is done in Knative with the vSphere sources. And so right now, those are two distant projects. One is the VEBA router, which has its own kind of view of how a cloud event should look like. And then there's the vSphere sources, which is the Knative native implementation of the router. And currently, we still don't use that Knative version because we are still supporting OpenFuzz and other processes. So that's why we can't rely on that. But with the change in 08, since we're going to default and only run on Knative, we're setting ourselves up to slowly migrate towards using more of these native Knative sources, which helps the community because every fix that goes into these Knative sources is automatically available in VEBA and vice versa. And the Knative community is really ticking up, and there's a lot of interesting sources or event providers like Git and GitLab and others and AWS. So we want to make this like natural and like a more natural experience instead of running with duplicate code. And then Harish is working on a new metrics implementation. Right now, we have a very primitive way of exposing metrics in VEBA on the stats endpoint. And this work will add support for Prometheus and Wavefront metrics in VEBA. And there's a little bit of work that needs to go in there, and like deciding which kind of metrics we want to track, and then also what are the metrics already available from a Knative standpoint, because there's also already Prometheus support in there. But this is going to benefit, I think, a lot of the users for persisting the metrics, not just viewing them, but also persisting them over a longer time. And Andy, he's also kind of new to the VEBA community. He's working on automating the whole appliance build process. So we do have a good CI pipeline right now around the container images that we have and some testing there. But for the whole appliance build, our testing strategy is William, and then a couple of people trying out the OVA builds. And that's what we also want to automate, the whole appliance build. And it's not easy because the appliance build requires a vSphere environment. And so because we run on public GitHub, it's not so easy to get a vSphere environment for all the security reasons and so on. And so Andy has a prototype already ready, but he's trying to figure out a way that it's like still secure and available like publicly, that we can run it outside there. Okay, that's it for 08 for now. Any questions on 08? Or comments or feedback?
I'm gonna pick on you, Johnny, for a second. Just out of curiosity, just for background, are you currently a VEBA user? Or are you new to VEBA? Just want to get a sense of kind of where you're coming from, and that way we can kind of tailor some of the content and discussion to help around that.
Yeah, so I'm relatively new to VEBA. I'd actually gone through a few of Patrick's tutorials with something in mind internally. Basically, I work in infrastructure and just had a little POC, if you will, to fire things into Slack effectively for other teams, you know, obviously off the back of events. So that was how I ended up here. But I've been long overdue getting into Kubernetes, so it's kind of a nice way to explore that as well.
Got it. And you mentioned Slack. Were there other scenarios or use cases that you're looking at? And what kind of event sources? I'm assuming vSphere, or were you looking at other types of integrations with VEBA?
Yeah, so it was vSphere, and what we had in mind initially that I've now done was in the event of HA failover, that we could send a list of VMs that had failed over to any interested, you know, sort of application teams, so they could do whatever they needed to do to check the health of services.
Ah, got it. Okay. And was that something that you were successful in setting up and configuring then, and looking into other possible use cases then, or were you still kind of working through that from your POC point of view?
Yeah, worked through that. Haven't actually deployed it yet due to other issues. But yeah, I have that running in a lab environment. So with a few other things in mind, but I think we need to sit down and have a conversation about those.
Got it. No, that's awesome. Yeah, and again, if you have any kind of questions, comments, or things that your ideas that you're thinking about, you know, this type of a forum is perfect. You know, you have a number of really smart folks across the VEBA team. We've supported a number of different users on a number of use cases. And I think one of the items maybe we did not cover in the 071, it's already live in our GitHub repo, is also just the different types of use cases that our users have been able to solve with VEBA. I think there's like almost like 80 plus scenarios that have been captured. And so if there are others that you find interesting, you know, feel free to contribute to that document. But it's also a good place to just kind of see what others have done in this space. And generally when you kind of look through it, you know, you'll see like, oh, wow, I didn't know that was possible. Or like, hey, I was looking to accomplish that. I wasn't sure how to get started. And generally there's some nice tidbits in there along with some of the samples and all that. So again, if you have more commentary, feel free to shout it out, or just you can throw it in chat and we can certainly cover that. This is definitely a great forum for that kind of discussion.
Awesome, thanks. I'll have to check that out.
Actually, let me grab that link actually while Michael's typing it out. So.
Right, so yeah, I was just quickly dumping the highlights of what I shared. Okay. A little bit of outlook. So as I said, because we will fully migrate to using Knative in VEBA, this is the time where we can also like leverage the existing Knative event sources and providers there. One of them being the vSphere sources, as I already mentioned, which basically allow you to connect Knative to a vCenter environment. And there's a lot of code already shared between the event router that we have in VEBA and the vSphere sources. But the only difference right now is how the events look like the subjects and the types that we define in the cloud event. And because we do want to harmonize that, that would be a breaking or will be a breaking change for users if you like depend on specific fields in the cloud event like subject or type, whether in your trigger configuration or in your function logic. So that is something that we're gonna like work towards in a way that we are not gonna break too much, but there will be breaking changes, and we'll announce this on Slack as well and as part of these meetings. And then there needs to be work done to get more of these sources into Knative, because VEBA not just supports vSphere. Obviously, we have the webhook source, the webhook functionality and Horizon, and that means we need to create sources in the Knative space so that we have feature parity. And because the code in the router already kind of is written in a way that it's portable to easily bootstrap these sources, it's merely a time or point where we need to discuss with the Knative team whether this should live in the sandbox environment or in a custom VEBA repo or somewhere else. So this is up for discussion, but I already heard good feedback from the Knative team that, for example, the webhook source is an interesting one to get in because webhooks are so dominant these days that Knative would definitely benefit from that. So that is the outlook. There's currently no milestone, whether it's going to be like an 08 release, like in a subsequent 08 release or an 09 release. because it has some external factors that we depend on here that we currently can't. Yeah, that we currently don't know at this point in time. Oh, Gabriel, yes, go ahead.
Yes. One question about this is, I'm new here. I don't have the whole context, but have you thought about creating a spec for the cloud events in the cloud event repo to implement the protocol binding and all of that, or that's something that is out of the picture for now?
Do you mean for the VEBA events or for which part of the transport?
Yes, for the VEBA events, exactly.
Yeah, so the good thing is that we don't need a new spec. It's just the way that we do use cloud events already. And it is just a matter of how we decided to use the cloud events fields, meaning we already use the code bindings in the HTTP transport, so that is good. And the only minor difference, and there's an issue, I think there might be an issue related to that here that I can quickly pull up. Issues, maybe here, it's an older one that I kept tracking, this one. So I made a table here that shows how these cloud events properties are used, type source, between the sources and the router. And so, for example, if you look at the cloud event ID, the router uses a v4 UUID generated, and vSphere sources uses the VC event key. For subject, which is, I think, this one, it's not used at all in the sources, but in the router, the subject is the actual vSphere event name. For example, VM powered on event, that would be the subject. Now, that is strictly speaking not correct. The way we use it here, that was kind of a learning after the fact, and so we are trying to align with what the sources is doing. It's basically that shape of the envelope attributes that we're going to working towards. And the good things, we started with JSON on the router, and that later we implemented that for the sources as well, because it started with XML, so we got parity there. So it's going to be minor, but it will be breaking, because if users have triggers or code depending on these fields, then well, the code will break, right? And so we need to have a discussion around that, and also help people to migrate. Did that answer your question, Gabriel?
Yes, I see. At least I have the issue. I will read it like a little bit more careful and see if maybe the spec makes sense. But yes, that answers at least for now the question.
Nice. Let me know. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
So let me look in the chat. VEBA use cases. Okay, that was just William catching up. So if there are no questions on these kind of items for the roadmap or the releases,
we also have two other folks.
Yeah.
Right. So Andy there. I'm not sure who VRA back as guest, but welcome. And we're just kind of going through the agenda. But if there's any other comments, and that goes for anybody, including the VEBA team, if there are questions, comments, things you want to bring up, feel free to shout it out or add it in chat. Again, this is time for the community. Things that you want to discuss. If not, I think Michael's probably going to jump into the demo with Robert, I'm assuming.
I see Gabriel has still hands up. Is another question, Gabriel?
No, that wasn't my bad. Let me put it.
Oh, okay. Good. Yeah, just one thing that I wanted to note is that the VEBA community meeting is every month at the end of the month. And so the next one would actually be during the holidays. So we will not have a meeting in December. So the next one will then be in January. I'm going to take a note in here, and then I'm also going to put it in chat in the Slack, in the public Slack.
Yeah, this is just to reiterate maybe before we close this session out.
Yep. So Robert, you can take it from here. I'm going to stop sharing.
All right, great. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for the overview and for the outlook. Very good. So I will start screen sharing now. Let me know if you see it.
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And if you watch the recording, thanks for doing it. And please put your questions regarding the upcoming topic in our Slack channel, would be good. And yeah, it's all about monitoring right now. So since VEBA is used more and more in production at our customers and at the VEBA community, it was just a matter of time when the question was raised after how to monitor VEBA, how to monitor the components which are running inside of VEBA, and of course the Kubernetes part of it, so the pods and the function itself. And with our latest release, the 07 release, we introduced this feature, add resource usage and performance monitoring. And on the one hand, we've implemented a new endpoint which gives you the capability or the possibility to directly go to this new endpoint, which is your VEBA host name and then /top to see the performance characteristics of the containers, as well as the resource utilization of your basically of your Kubernetes master node, the VEBA appliance. And on the other hand, it provides a new endpoint which you to which you can connect to with external or third-party tools. So monitoring tools like VEBA Operations Manager, for example. And speaking of which, you need something out of the box, or not out of the box, you need something which you have to add to VEBA Operations Manager to monitor those Kubernetes clusters, for example. And this is called the management pack, VEBA Operations Management Pack. So out of the box, we have a lot of management packs available, which you can activate here. But the VMware VEBA Operations Management Pack for Kubernetes isn't part of the default. But you can download it, and you can download it for free on the VMware marketplace. So just search for VEBA Operations Management Pack for Kubernetes. The latest version is 1.6, and this gives you the capability to really discover your Kubernetes clusters, to monitor them, to creating inventory and have those relationship maps, and of course all the details regarding your pod utilization and the Kubernetes node utilization. So, and if you have added this management pack to your VRups instance, you can do the following. You can create a new account, and this new account is then the Kubernetes endpoint. And I've done this today. It is my VEBA appliance. And all what you have to do is to provide the URL with the port 6443, which is the basic port or the default port for the API server of the Kubernetes node, and then select daemon set, for example. And then you can add credential, or you have to add your credentials to connect to VEBA and to, of course, grab all the metrics and data out of VEBA. And client-cert authentication, for example, is one of the methods. And what you have to provide in here for the client-cert authentication is the certificate authority data, client certificate data, and the client key data. So the question now is where you can get this from. If you connect to the VEBA appliance via SSH, for example, I have done this here already. You can simply, you can simply execute this command. And don't worry, I have documented all of my GitHub repository so that it is easy for you to just copy paste. And if you do this, for example, you will get everything shown up here. What it is basically, it is just the content out of your Kubernetes configuration. So if I do a kubeconfig here and do a cat there, you can see, okay, it's basically, it is the same, but the other format looks nicer, so in my opinion. Okay, so, and if you have this data, you just put it in here and you have everything what you need to connect to your VEBA instance. And one thing to mention is also important is to put your vCenter server in which your VEBA appliance is running in here, so the name, because then VRups will create the relationship of the Kubernetes node to the virtual appliance, so that you can monitor not only the Kubernetes endpoint, but also the virtual machine. So this is, of course, also of interest. So, and then I thought, okay, maybe you have other Kubernetes clusters in your environment running and you like to monitor it, but this particular dashboard, what I've created and what I will show you in a bit, you will just monitor your VEBA instances with this dashboard. So how can you exclude other Kubernetes clusters, for example, or how you can just concentrate really on your VEBA instances? So there is a function in VROPS which is called custom groups. You can see it here under environment and then custom groups. And I've created a custom group which is easily called VEBA instances. So, and those custom groups gives you the ability to create membership criteria. So, and I've made it simple. As a membership criteria, I defined a vSphere tag. So in vSphere, I've created a new category and a new vSphere tag and applied this vSphere tag, which is called VEBA VROPS, applied it to my VEBA instance or instances. And then you can easily see that when you click on preview that, okay, there's really just this one particular VEBA instance, or if you have multiple, then of course, all of them will show here if you applied the tag to them. And then you sorted out all of the other Kubernetes clusters in case you have such Kubernetes clusters added here to VROPS or running in your infrastructure, basically. Okay, so, and then what you can do is you can download the various, so the dashboard, the necessary views and the dashboard itself, and you can do it. So normally you would go here to VMware Code because we are exchanging code snippets and VRS Operations Manager dashboards or other content here. And if you search for a VRS Operations Manager dashboard for VMware Event Broker appliance, you will see that there are basically just two, right? That there are basically two versions available. And V2 is the latest one because V1 was, more focused on OpenFast and some other widgets are in this. And it evolved depending on the user feedback, of course, and V2 is the latest one. And you can download it here, but what it will basically do when you click the download button, it will forward you to my GitHub repository. And if you, so when you are forwarded, you will find it's loading. All right, so you will find a guide how to import the necessary views as well as the dashboard and what is necessary for the configuration part. So what I already mentioned, for example, the credentials, how to add them and what's necessary. And of course, also the vSphere tag, which you have to create as a membership criteria and the dynamic custom groups in VROPS itself. So, and then you go to your VROPS instance and add the dashboard as well as the views. And then you have under visualize and dashboards, you have the new dashboard available, which will then look like this. So here are a couple of widgets here, but what I wanted to do is really to focus on the resource utilization of the virtual machine itself. So this is what basic information are showing up here. So the name, the IP address, the parent vCenter. I like to add here parent vCenter. I was hoping that VRS Operations Manager will show the host name, so the FQDN of the vCenter server, but what it shows here is really the endpoint. So how you define the endpoint in VROPS, so the vCenter server when you connect to it. So, and then from a resource perspective, how many vCPUs are configured for VEBA, what is the usage in percent of the vCPU as well as for memory. And because we had this topic in the past, how about the disk utilization? So this will also showing up here. Then I've put some links here, which are hopefully usable so that you can easily click on it to get forwarded to our GitHub repository, for example, where you can find the function examples for VEBA, as well as, of course, to our homepage. And then I think sometimes it could be worth to know which Kubernetes version is running on the project, as well as the container runtime. So Michael mentioned it aforementioned it. That currently we are using Docker, but with 0.8 we are planning to replace the Docker with containerd. So right now you can see here the version which is used, for the kubelet as well as for Docker for the container runtime. And of course, our OS image. So and then we have some trend widgets, for example, for memory and of course for CPU. You are not seeing a lot of trend lines here because the reason for it is I had to reconfigure my whole environment today and added the VEBA appliance really this morning to VROPS. So this is the reason why I cannot see some cool long trend lines here. But anyway, it is showing up here. And of course, what is absolutely important is how about the health of my containers, my functions, and every other important component. So let me just select the pod, for example. One example function which I've added here is the KN power. Yeah, it's already selected. The KN power CLI tagging function. The namespace in which it is running in is showing up underneath on the widget underneath. And then there is this relationship diagram, which could be really useful. I hope it could be really useful for you, because what it does, it shows all pods which are running in this particular namespace. So our thought was all functions, read all functions will be deployed in this namespace, which is called VMware functions. And you can see then that, for example, that there is this function example, the power CLI tagging function, and the replica set, as well as the containers, because two containers are running in this pod, which the one is from Knative is the kube proxy container, and the other is the user container, which will gives you, for example, as a log output, the power CLI output. And you can see the health status of it. And the cool thing here is, if we have this ability to see how our pods are doing, we can easily create alerts. And I've done this quickly here. So what I did is I created alert symptoms, which is called containers available. So yes or no. And I used the output plugin from VROPS, which is called Slack. Slack, it's out of the box there. I think it's since version 8.5 available, and you can provide or can use a Slack webhook to get notified if something, so if an alert was raised, for example. And I did this, and I can show you here that it works. So I have a Slack channel here, and I can see, okay, that my Contour pod, for example, so Contour is our Ingress controller, that there was a problem recently, and this particular alert was raised that the container wasn't available anymore. I think that was due to a restart, and I was notified. So the top alerts regarding the VEBA appliance will show up here at the button right widget. So container is not available. This is basically the Contour container which I've showed you, and the VEBA test is my alert which I've created. So you can really do some cool things. Also regarding troubleshooting, so going deeper into the pods, the containers, the services of Kubernetes, of course, the nodes. So, okay, in our case here in VEBA, it's really just one node, but you can really dig down to the resource consumption and utilization. Requirements, you need at least VRS Operations Manager Advanced. This is due to with the enablement of custom dashboards. So advanced with VREPS standard, for example, you cannot create custom dashboards or import some community dashboards, and this is the reason why you have to go with advanced version. What else? This again, everything is explained on the GitHub repository. The management pack is for free. You can easily import the dashboard as well as the views. And yeah, I think that's it. Any questions?
Why didn't you use the webhook function for VROPs to send the event to VEBA?
Yeah, good question, Michael. I want to make it quick and dirty. This is the
Yes.
reason.
Thanks, Robert, for the demo.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, again, if you watch the recording, for example, and you have some questions, put it in the Slack VEBA community in the Slack channel, or raise an issue here on GitHub, or just ping me.
Yeah, we'll add that to the notes as well. No, awesome demo, and yeah, sounds like future enhancements to the management package to be able to send alerts to VEBA itself if it sees something interesting, right? So
Indeed.
Looks like we have one question from VRA back. Is it possible to deploy VEBA or the needed components to a TKGS or vSphere 7 with Tanzu environment? And if this would be like a normal VEBA OVA deployment? Great question. It's been some time since I've performed it, because there's been some changes in how you can easily deploy VEBA. And it's just for background purpose for other folks, especially for the recording, is that today VEBA itself is packaged up as a Kubernetes native application, right? We bundle it in a virtual appliance just for ease of use and ease of deployment. And this is great for just getting started and for small environments. For customers that want to, take this to the next level, certainly from a support standpoint, we do have something called Cloud Native Runtime that has the kind of sort of the inner heart of the VEBA componentry. And that's certainly useful for customers that want to have a supportive mechanism and kind of get the VEBA experience. And so you can certainly deploy CNR to any valid Kubernetes infrastructure, including TKGS. Specifically, if you wanted to deploy the VEBA variant today, you can use Helm. So you deploy a standard Tanzu Kubernetes cluster in TKGS. You'll have to, set up the PSP or disable it by default, depending on how you want to set up your access control, and then go in and set up your Helm installation of the router. And then you obviously would need to set up the vCenter credentials, and you would basically get the basics of VEBA. You wouldn't necessarily get the exact same appliance because the appliance does have additional functionality. For example, some of the things that Robert had just mentioned in terms of metrics, that would be part of that. And we also have other endpoints. So we have the router deployed with, if you're using Horizon as an example, if you specify that in the OVF properties, we'll enable a specific router that contains the necessary configuration for Horizon, and similarly for the webhook, same thing. So the appliance does have additional stuff that's added to it, for ease of use and consumption. Nothing prevents you from deploying those individual components. Right now, we don't really have a process for you to stand up all those components kind of in a sequential manner outside of the appliance. The repo itself is completely open source, and so you can certainly take a look at how we deploy those components if you're interested in it. So hopefully that helps kind of answer the question.
Cool. Looks like no more questions, and we're also good with the agenda for today. Oh yeah, so that answered the question. So if there's no more topics, the next meeting will be January 25th in the coming year, which sounds like it's far away, but it isn't. And yeah, hope to see everyone healthy soon to the next VEBA call then. William, anything else before we close this?
No. Thanks for attending. And again, folks that are listening to recording, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to engage with us on the Slack channel, and look forward to seeing what folks are doing with VEBA in 2022.
Indeed.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
Bye.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.